welcome to the show. This is another episode of the Paranormal Experience. I'm your host, Eliza Broadbent, and up here we've got Travis Bruce, my co-host, and with us today we've got Beau Tadesse. He is a horror author out of Maryland, and he's got a book, Ghosts of Poplar Valley.
That's right.
Right, and he is going to tell us his paranormal experience. Travis and I have no idea what he's about to say. So, welcome to the show, Besu.
Welcome, Besu.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here. Very, very glad to share the stories.
So, what happened to you? Tell us what you got.
Okay. Well, I've got two stories. One is a little bit minor. A little bit sadder, though. So earlier this year, our family dog passed away. She passed away in August 2024, actually on the first day of my son's first day of kindergarten.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so it was a big event. My in-laws came by. We were sending them off. And then later that day, our had a little dog. She's a little Chinese crested, about 10 pounds. She'd already been sort of in failing health. And it was very clear, like, that looked like that was where she basically just was going to give up. So I took her to the pet hospital. They told us all the things. And so she passed away later that day. So, we all said our goodbyes. One thing that I started noticing after that, though, is that after we had sent off to have her cremated, and during the period after that, I would randomly hear like tiny little footsteps, like dog steps around, that stopped once we got the ashes. So you'd hear like, I stay up late at night doing a lot of different things. My kid gets to bed late, super, super late. And so I'm up doing all the things I wasn't able to do, and you hear like the little pitter patter of like kind of like floating around. And that went on until we received the ashes back. And once I was able to take the box and like all the stuff they send to us, which is very, very sweet. They send like a note, and it's a very, very like really touching sort of memorial. And I put that away. So the ashes are in the house, and I put them to the side. My wife doesn't really want to see that stuff, and it's really, really hurtful. My kid obviously can't be trusted around that sort of things because he's only 5. So you don't want any type of accidents or stuff. But everything, all those sounds basically stopped once we received the box, and I put the box away. So that was the more recent one. That one is less troubling than my other story.
That's okay. That's wild.
Yeah, it was a little bit crazy to hear, but it was kind of almost, like, I don't know if it's my mind playing tricks on me or if there's something that's really going on, but...
That sounds so distinctive, though, because like, what your dog sounds like going through the house, Yeah. Like, I have two really big dogs. I have a German Shepherd and a Sumter County Dog Goblin we got from the SPCA down in Sumter County, South Carolina. Like she's a Timu German Shepherd, okay? And I know like exactly what both those dogs sound like. Like I can tell when they go down the hallway, like which one it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I know. And I know like what my cats sound like even, I'm
the same way with my cat.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So did you investigate, or did you try to see where the sounds were coming from? Did you check at any point?
No. As soon as I heard it, I had a suspicion of what it was, and I said, well, it's either my mind or it's something else, and either way, I'm not really inclined to look into it any further. I already knew what it was, and it was either something on the outside I already knew or something inside of me, and that's I was comfortable with both of those being the answer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because I mean, our pets are like our kids, so I mean, it's. Yeah. Maybe I wouldn't want to know. Yeah, I agree. Maybe I wouldn't want to know.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like, shh, I didn't tell my wife about that. because I know that how she would feel about it, and hopefully she's asleep too. So we'll see. Yeah. But no, if she sees this will be the first time she's ever heard this story. So yeah, so like I said, I didn't want to get into it. I kind of just understood what it was going to be. So I was happy with it.
That's really cool. I'm always really, really moved when people come on here, because a lot of the stories they tell us, you expect like, oh, the paranormal experience, like we're going to hear these wild stories about like, UFOs and demons. That was kind of what I envisioned when this started out, like we're going to hear about the time Pedro saw a demon, and we did hear about that. We did hear one of those stories.
Grim Reaper coming through his bedroom, yeah.
We heard some wild ass stories from Pedro the other week, but we've also heard some really moving stories. Like people have told us some of Pedro's stories, and one or two of Edmund's were very very heartfelt. Like these aren't all like bump in the night scary stuff. So I'm always really, really stunned when people tell me this stuff. Like these are not just like, it's not all freaky.
His family members and pets, and they're coming to them, and pretty much saying that hey, I'm still here. I'm looking over you.
Definitely.
Yeah, I was just happy she's able to rest. So
yes,
that was the big thing. She had a lot of problems towards the end. It was a lot of like kidney failure. She was going blind, and those are all normal parts of what her breed just goes through at the end. But it's not any easier to see. So I'm happy that everything just kind of calmed down.
And I'm saying you have a second story for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was worse. So, so that one pretty straightforward. I was asleep one night, and I can't remember the dream exactly. I know that there was like some other event of the dream going on at some point, but at some point that whole thing stopped. I was still asleep, and everything just kind of went black. And I distinctly remember this like tiny little, I don't know what to call it. I don't know if it was like a point of light or something that was just like kind of like sitting inside of my view while I was asleep. And within the dream, very distinctly, I just heard a very like soft, high-pitched voice going, Besu. And I immediately woke up, and I was like, I'm not going back to sleep. Because something's calling for me in the darkness, and I want no part. I want zero part of whatever was happening there. And it was like, I don't know what's going on there. And I was like, nope, I'm out. I'm not going to do it. And I stayed up until I could finally, I eventually got to bed, but I was like, I can't deal with that. And I told my wife the next day, and she's just like, did you go anywhere? I was like, no. And she's like, good. Do not follow. Don't follow whatever that voice was that was telling you, like trying to call you in. I've never had it before. I've never had it since. But just randomly, just like I had this little tiny thing from the darkness, just like quiet, like almost like a child's voice, like quietly calling for me.
Nope.
Yeah, exactly. Nope.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna deal with it.
Nope.
What is it about kids' voices, unknown kid voices, that is so creepy?
A kid's voice at 3 p.m. is not creepy. A kid's voice at 3 a.m. is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, why are you awake?
Unknown
right
kid's voice is always it makes you feel uneasy.
Yeah,
I even heard, right there.
Yeah, even when if my son is awake a little bit too long and I don't expect him to be there, and I just hear like a bump somewhere, or just hear like a dad, like that's already a lot. Yeah. But this happened before I had children. So I had no reason. It wasn't like there was a kid somewhere that I should be expecting to hear a voice or like some tragic story. It was just a child's voice calling me from the darkness in the middle of my dreams. So I still don't know what it is. The general theme is when I hear it, I'm like, I'm just gonna leave it wherever it's gonna be.
no.
Yeah. Yeah, it was not pleasant.
And this is where we go back to the theme that we have touched on in another show, which is you know when you're dreaming and you know when you're not.
Yes.
When you're asleep.
Yeah.
We've talked about this on here before.
Yeah. It was weird. And the fact that it was like, it cut off the other dream. Like, I don't remember what it was, but I know something was going on. The whole thing was to shut down whatever was going on just to call for me.
So that's creepy. Like, I'm going to shine on a real life story for me. Like, I used to work in a cemetery, one of the most haunted places in Maryland. Cedar Hill, you live in Maryland, Cedar Hill Cemetery, which is in Portland, Maryland, on Ritchie Highway. Yeah. And you know, paranormal groups have went there and everything. And I used to work late by the time I get out of there. And we had a section that was called Babyland. And that's where all of the babies were buried from, you know, early on. Yeah. And I would hear, and I would just be walking past my car, and I would hear children laughter coming from that section all the time.
Oh my God!
And you can go on YouTube and see the paranormal groups have visited cemetery, and that's something at night you hear that children laughter, and it's not like it's not like friendly children laughter. It's very like sinister sounding.
Mm-hmm.
That's not okay.
That's very restless.
So there's something about, I mean, for me personally, there's something about hearing unknown children laughter or voices definitely get me like, yeah, I'm not moving forward. I'm not going to see what that is.
Yeah, at least not until the daytime.
Yes.
Yeah.
That I'm so creeped out. The idea of like walking through a cemetery at night and hearing a random sinister child laughter.
I used to hear all kinds of shit working in the cemetery, which is why I don't work in cemeteries anymore.
Yeah,
you have the wildest stories. You have the wildest ass stories from working where you work. Oh my God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I told one of my kids one of your stories the other day, and his jaw was on the ground. But my God.
But like, yeah, I mean, that's why I love this show, because I like to hear that other people have the same. I think we talked about last time. It's amazing to hear that other people have similar experiences, and you know, you're like, I'm not alone, and I'm not a crazy person.
Well, I mean, we were at Booby's Brewery 2 weeks ago. You know, we were at the brewery where we had Dark Dress Festival. Besu was there, and you know Rebecca Cuthbert. Rebecca Cuthbert and I are sitting at a table down in the gallery with Rhonda Jackson, right? Both my editors. I have one of my editors on each side of me. We start getting a mobile cold spot under that table. Now, we had gotten my son a ton of ghost hunting equipment for his birthday. So I had an EMF reader with me. I'm the dork that brings the EMF reader to the haunted brewery. So we start getting this mobile cold spot. Now, Rhonda has enough sense in her head that when we start getting this cold spot, and of course we're doing the white girl thing where we're like, where is it coming from? Where is it coming from? Is it a drift? What is it? So we're looking all over the place. Rhonda looks at us and she's like, I have to go talk to somebody upstairs. Yeah, exactly. And she just like walked out. Straight out. She did not come back all morning. Okay. So she came back like once or twice and like walked back in. Like walked in and walked out again. So I'm like, okay, we can't find where this is coming from. I'm going to go get the EMF reader. This thing was going off the damn charts. And I mean, it's, you know, an EMF reader works. It reads like electromagnetic frequencies. And so, like, if you have it near a cell phone, if you have it near, like, an outlet, it'll go up a little bit, you know? This thing was reading like we had it sitting on an active microwave. It was going up into the red zone, like, over and over and over. We had it sitting on a pile of books. There was no electronics near it. And we're asking it questions. We're like, are you a man? Are you a woman? And it's not answering us. And then I said, are you not human? It goes all the way up to red.
No.
I'm like, that's the face right there. I was like, I don't think we need to keep asking you questions now. I don't want to know the answers to these questions anymore.
I'm glad you said that because I did not spend any time. I didn't spend as much time in your room. So, Travis, I don't know if you've ever seen the layout of Booby's Brewery.
I have not.
It is a very like old. Like you have to go down to go up in certain places, and then there's like these other side entrances because it's really two buildings kind of meshed together.
Mm-hmm.
And Eliza was over in one of like the transition hallways where there was like a lot of the old barrels and everything. So that's what she's talking about. I was in the catacomb. We were having a great time in the catacomb. we were just like partying it up where the party was going to be. But yeah, I don't. That's wild that you were getting.
Yeah, and the weird thing was that was on Sunday. We had nothing like that on Saturday.
Oh,
nothing like that on Saturday.
Where were they on Saturday? Were they upstairs on Saturday? Were they just sleeping?
I have no idea. Did somebody use a Ouija board in there on Saturday night?
Somebody used a Ouija board somewhere.
And that's what that's what we were wondering.
I think somebody called somebody somewhere, and I have no idea when it happened. I don't know if it was Friday or Saturday, or maybe it was Saturday. I think it was during the. Somebody had mentioned it during the ball, right?
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. I was thinking somebody used a Ouija board in there because there was nothing there on Saturday. Then on Sunday we went down there and there was 100% something there.
Well, surprise.
But I love paranormal stuff, but I don't want to communicate with the paranormal. And maybe that's because I'm black or something. But I don't want to I'm not going to investigate shit. I like to watch other people investigate stuff, but I'm not investigating.
I just wanted to see, because I had never done it before. I have never done it. And I don't think I will ever do it again. Ever.
You shouldn't. You should.
I was not interested. I was like, I want to try this. I want to see if it works. And it worked, and I never need to see it again.
See, Rhonda told you.
Literally never. Literally never.
Rhonda gave you the
Rhonda had the right idea. Rhonda had the right idea. Because my spider sense was going off. I was like, I know there's something here. And I kind of wanted to be like, it was more like, does this EMF reader work? Than like, is there a ghost here? It was like, does the EMF reader actually correspond to the ghost? Then like, is the EMF reader going to tell me there's a ghost? Does that make sense? Because like, I knew there was a ghost here.
and now that you know, you put yourself on a rotation.
I know, right? Like, I don't need to do this again. I don't need to test this again.
Yeah. I was asked recently by someone, and we were like, why don't you guys on your show do a Ouija board with a guest and this and that? I'm like, I'm not doing that shit.
No.
What are they talking about?
Like doing an actual like Ouija board spiritual talk like on the show with a guest, and I'm like, no, I'm
Spirits
not.
They can't do anything for me, and I can't do anything for them.
Yeah, I am not doing that. Probably get a lot of fucking views, but at the same time, once this camera go off, I don't know what it's going to be in my fucking house.
Yeah,
that stuff opens a portal.
Yeah.
No, I don't play with.
You don't open a portal in your house and expect nothing's going to come through it.
Yeah.
Yep.
You let those people at Dark Drafts open a portal somewhere and see how that works out for them, because it's not going to work out for me.
No, the Dark Drafts folks, they, from what I understand, it's just a lot of the folks that were, like, the Boobies family seem to be the ones that kind of hang out there a lot, that's their business. We went to their house, so, like, I get it. But I know some of the people that have been in my house, and some of those people have passed on, and I don't want them back. I didn't want them here when they were living. I don't want them here now.
I feel that.
Not everybody, but there's a few choice people. I'm like, I really didn't even want you here. Like, do you think I want you here? Do you think I want to call you back here to give you the chance? No.
Look, my relatives coming through are bad enough. Okay, I can think of a lot of other stuff that could come through that would be even worse than my relatives. I mean, I was telling, I don't know if we were live when I was talking about this, that I knew priests who were like the diocese exorcists growing up when I was a kid. And like, they would tell us, they'd be like, do not mess with a Ouija board. Do not mess with a Ouija board. Do not use a Ouija board. I knew kids who had to have the priest called out to exorcise their house because they used a Ouija board and like called something. Yeah. I mean, you don't touch that thing.
Yeah.
Why? Just why? Go, even if you want to do it, go somewhere else. Open it up somewhere else.
It'll follow you.
Yep. The spirits follow you.
That's their business. If you're so inclined to do it, go out to the woods, go somewhere else. If you're going to do all that stuff, don't center your home as the spot for when you're going to do all that.
No, good advice from Besu there. Yeah. Good advice. So,
I was about to say, when you experienced all this, did it change your beliefs or the way you thought about paranormal and spirits?
No, because ever since I've gotten to adulthood, it's always been more about just questioning and just kind of expecting that there's just going to be some things I'm never going to be able to explain, and just being okay with it. I think once you realize, like, I don't have to explain everything. I've sensed it. I know it. It's something that happened, and then you just kind of have to go on with your life without it taking up too much headspace. Unless things are really going crazy, which they haven't, right? It's just been sort of a touch and go. Like, even the stories I've said are very temporary. It's not something that, it resolves itself, and it's just like maybe there's just some rustling in a dimension, in a pocket dimension somewhere that I don't understand yet, that I don't know where, what happens into the next life, if there is a next life. Whatever it is that's going on, there must be something. I don't know what it is, and I'm okay with the unknown part of that. And I'm willing to just kind of move forward in life knowing that I will never know.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, all this stuff that has happened, has this colored your writing at all?
Has it colored my writing? I think there are some new things that I'm going to be writing soon. Probably not the next big work I'm doing right now. It doesn't really involve a lot of that stuff. I think there are some smaller works that I've been outlining that I think would be really good, but I think it does, and some of that stuff mixes in with some of those ideas for like my smaller pieces that are going to be hopefully coming out by next year. Time pending, work pending, life pending. Yeah.
So talking about your work, right? Before we get to what you're working on next, tell us about the Ghosts of Poplar Valley.
Ghosts of Poplar Valley. It is a group of kids going into the woods. The main part of it starts in the mid-1980s. It is set in Georgia, but in a fictional Georgia, a fictional town. A friend of mine read it, and he described it as if it was like, I Know What You Did Last Summer, but if Stephen King wrote it. So much more along the lines of like dealing with the events of what's going on, and then it tracks one of the characters after the events of everything that happens on the night in the 80s, what happens to her and her friends, like what she goes through then after that, and trying to exactly what we were just talking about, trying to explain what happened and why it happened, and why is it she was the one that was able to get through, and very much sort of a reading on that. It traces harkens back to a lot of like Jim Crow era segregation, so that's a lot that comes into play with the ghosts, which you'll find out if you read it, Ghosts of Poplar Valley, in all your bookstores. And so it connects a lot of that stuff from the past and moving to the present. So it's a little bit I Know What You Did Last Summer, a little bit Candyman, a little bit Frankenstein, like a lot of that influence from that.
So this is my thing. So then we get to talk about the South and the past of the South.
Yes.
And writing about that stuff, because that's what I write. Like, that's the big thing that I always slam up against in my writing, because I'm from South Carolina. So I'm always writing about like the horrible past of the South.
Yes.
Basically. Like that's Travis will tell you that's like what I'm always slamming my head up against.
The past and the future.
And the future, right? And the future.
Yeah.
And the future and the present, right?
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that in your fiction? Like what kind of stuff has come up just in the Ghost of Poplar Valley? Like what was the experience of writing it like?
So the basis of it, I was reading Slavery by Another Name by Douglas Blackman. And it was going through like what was happening during Reconstruction and Jim Crow era, right? So a lot of the not just the big broad strokes, but a lot of the detailed portions of it, right? So it's like what were happening to free people who were, free black people who were then basically they were just creating bullshit laws to abduct them and essentially sell them to other people who sold them to other people to use them as labor to eventually do all this stuff, right? And then it just gets into a lot of like the extrajudicial killing, the lynching portions of it, and about how like creative and brutal and like if there was ever any creativity that was coming out of the majority during Jim Crow South, it was in the brutality business, right? Different ways that you can create spectacle out of tortures and maimings and those sorts of things, right? And that became the basis of this book. It was like when you're hearing about the different methods, you start thinking about you can't have those methods without people in your town who provide the supplies to do those sorts of things. Like there's an ecosystem that sits around. So one particular thing is talking about the tarring and feathering of individuals, and like somebody has to make that. Like that's not a organic thing. Those are you have to create those. You have to manufacture those. There's potential use of like barrels, right? And how they were in one particular story. They were talking about they found a guy and they shoved him into a barrel. They nailed the barrel shut, and then they hammered nails into the sides of the barrel so that the sharp parts were going in, and they were rolling barrels down the hill. I'm like, that is a fantastically grotesque way to spend your time, right? To do something like that to a neighbor or somebody who's just around, right? Just outright terrorism. Then you have to think about like, well, who's manufacturing the barrels in town? Who are the people that are financing this thing? Who are the people that are covering up these things? Who are doing, like, you don't just do those sorts of things without an environment that allows it. And that started to get my wheels turning. And that then became the basis of who is the villain, per se, in the story. And then the rest of the story just basically wrote itself. So there's methods of killing in it, but that's like the least creative part of the story. So that I could just take straight from history.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is hugely powerful.
Yeah.
And I mean, one thing that I think people that aren't Southern are not going to get about that it's really hard, I think, for people who are not from the South, particularly like the Deep South, to understand is like the interconnectedness of that. And like, the interconnectedness, not just of the people in the town, but just the black and white communities. Like these are people who knew each other. These are people who saw each other every day. These are people who, you knew who made those barrels. The person who made the barrel knew the person they were sticking in that barrel. These are people who are intimately acquainted, who probably grew up with one another. I mean, the way that those lives were intertwined, these are not strangers in a city who had never seen each other, who had maybe passed on the street. These were people who had grown up together, who knew each other's families, who could probably recite the names of each other's grandparents.
Yeah.
So really kind of standing back and appreciating the interconnectedness of that community adds another layer just to that absolute horror of those incidents, you know?
And so that's why in the book, when there's a part where we talk about like a fictional accounting of it, of who these people were and what it was, but even if it's fictitious, I make up that there's like prominent families who find their way out. Like, to stress that there's people who are well known, even, this isn't just like an economic thing. Like, there's well known people in certain towns that basically had to escape to like avoid all this other stuff. But that was part of what it was, is trying to get these finer details that like it really is like it was a uniquely different level of just like brutality that, as a theme of the story, then circles back around to individuals in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't get to just you don't get to enact that kind of violence on an institutional level without some sort of reverberation that moves into future generations. Right? It's not possible.
No.
So,
no.
Don't you think it's weird too that like as a country, we try to go to other cultures and countries and say that you are savages and you are violent and so that. But we have this kind of past and present. To be honest,
it's not that. I don't find it to be that. I mean, that's part of the narrative, right? Is that we are noble simply because of who we are, right? And if you take it as, my group is the most noble, it actually doesn't matter what you do, because you'll always justify it as nobility in some kind of way, right? So all the more so it's like, well, we're the noble ones, we're the ones that are going to bring all this other stuff, but we also create the weapons and machinery, and we generate the laws, and then we generate exceptions to the laws for ourselves because we're the most noble and we know what's best, right? So you can even see that, in the world today, where there's, multiple killings and genocides across the world, right, in all these different regions, right? We're dealing with, Sudan and Congo and Palestine and Myanmar and all these different places where things are happening. And you see a general theme. It's another one of these things about like the general themes of when you see these sorts of like terrorist regimes, is you also see the belief that you're noble and that you're the most moral, and therefore anything we do is justification for our nobility and morality. And then you'll see again an ecosystem circling around it to say, yes, we agree. And oftentimes that ecosystem is because they too want to do the same things. Like, they also understand, not in a not in a very underlying way, but in a very overt way. They understand, like, we have to do this because if we say this against you, we have to look at ourselves and say the same thing. So, for context, right, like, my family's Ethiopian, right? So I'm wearing my Ethiopia shirt, right? So if you talk about, World War II Ethiopia with the Italian invasion, it's a lot of the same conversation. Like, they went to the League of Nations. The Ethiopian emperor says, you can't allow this, right? It gives this, moving speech where he says, like, you can't allow this, like, fledgling European power to come and use, all these weapons of war against us to do all these sorts of things. And Italy says, well, we want to go in there and use airplanes and mustard gas. And Britain and France don't want that to happen because they understand, like, that's illegal, and it's illegal against the League of Nations. But also, if we say that, what does that say about our colonialism? And so, what are we going to do about that, right? We can't tell somebody not to overtake an African country when our two countries have overtaken like 60% of the continent, right? So I think people understand it. They understand what they're saying, and they understand what they're doing, and they know the contradiction is there, and they don't care. Like, it's not, they're not going to care unless either they fall under the weight of, their own hubris, or something else happens that basically crushes that idea. And in some places that idea just hasn't been crushed, right? So people still want to hold on to it. That's what we talk about, like, whether or not we see people who, like, how can we go off and tell other countries? That's part of the game, right? That's part of the deal, is to talk about all the other stuff that's going on without necessarily addressing it. I think some places in the U.S. are trying to address it. There's been some like indigenous land back movements, and there's been a lot of memorials and a lot of things where, even if something is saying like putting a plaque somewhere and saying like, these people existed, they were here, and this is the thing that happened, and we want you to remember that this happened, and to not let that happen again, I think is an important step of that. It's moving along, but I think like that's the broader thing you're asking about, Travis, is like that's the game. Like it's the consistent thing that I see in the game. And so nowadays, being in my early 40s, when I start to see that, I know what the next moves are going to be.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Yes,
we appreciate having you. It was great hearing your stories. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, I was happy to be here. This is fun.
It was.
Besu, by the way, where can everyone find you on social media?
Okay, you can find me Instagram, TikTok, Lemonade, a bunch of other different places, all at Sticky Bear Artist. Standard spelling for Sticky Bear and Artist.
By the way, every time I ask that question, somebody throws out another type of social media that I've never heard of. What is Lemonade?
Lemonade it's like TikTok's version of Instagram. Like they have it's like their lifestyle pictures, still pictures with some video type stuff. It looks like a yellow Instagram.
Okay.
Interesting.
So just learning how to do this. Yeah, there's like Lemonade, Red Note, which I found out about, was like the Chinese version of TikTok. I'm just trying to find a lot of different. I'm learning more stuff right now. I think people are getting hip to the game and learning that they need to start diversifying to even different platforms. So I'm learning about that stuff now. Trying to find some book club apps to try and pull a lot of that stuff away from the other larger companies.
Yeah. Well, it was great having you. Thanks for coming on the show, Besu. And we're all going to be looking out for your latest book. The why is it escaping me right now? It's so late. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The Ghost of Poplar Grove. Why did it just escape me? It's like 11:15 here right now, and I am so old. I'm so old. I'm so sorry. I'm so old at this point.
I've got 4 titles that are out now. Thank goodness. So
yes. What else do you have? What else do you have out before we go?
So we have The Ghost of Poplar Valley. We have Broken Persons, which is a collection of short stories, and then I'm in 2 short story anthologies that just came out in the last couple weeks. One is called Devour the Rich, and then another one is called Arsenic and Grandmother's Refrigerator.
Very cool. We'll keep a lookout for them. Thank you so much. I'm Eliza Broadbent. This is Travis Bruce, and this was the Paranormal Experience on the Horror Realm. Thanks for listening.